Welcome to today's episode of the Game Used Podcast. I'm John Robinson, your host for today's episode and founder and owner of Resolution Photo Matching. The Game Used Podcast is brought to you by Resolution Photo Matching. If you have any game used pieces you're interested in getting authenticated, go to our website, resolutionphotomatching.com, or shoot us an email at info@resphotomatching.com. For today's episode, I'm excited to have him with us. He is one of the premier autograph authenticators of the last 20 plus years. You know him from Pawn Stars. You know him from Beckett Authentication. Steve Grad is with us today. Steve, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. What's happening?
Absolutely. I want to start off with one question. It hit me as I was writing up your intro this morning.
Sure.
The term autograph versus signature, do you use them interchangeably? Is there one that you use more than the other?
I'd say probably autograph. But at times when we used to chase, or I used to chase autographs, can I please have your signature? We would vary back and forth, but now I just say autograph pretty much all the time, unless I'm doing something or writing an article or something and it becomes redundant. It's just, so you switch back and forth, but I've never used the word signature authenticator. No one's ever called me that, but Rick Harrison says it sometimes on Pawn Stars, actually. Or my signature guy, but I just say autograph authenticator. Unless I'm at the Hall of Fame, where when I was at the I went there to research years ago, and I'm in the library and they're like, we don't call them autographs. We call them signatures. They have a signature placed on it. We don't call them autographs. So no problem. So
Yeah,
just there, they use it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought of. Like in the industry, it seems like autograph is the main term, but like if someone's really trying to sound elevated and kind of take it in that direction, then it seems like signature. But yeah, autograph's the term that I always usually go
Yeah,
to.
for
But
sure.
yeah, I mean, you're obviously, on the extremely short list, right at the top of that list of people that do all things autographs. How did you first get started, and kind of where did you really learn and kind of get your expertise going back all those years?
I think the starting point was probably at 8 years old, 9 years old. My grandmother had always had a fascination with autographs, and her one of her sisters, two of her sisters did. And my grandmother had met Herbert Hoover, and my aunt and my mom met Jackie Robinson. So like it was always like kind of in the family blood somewhere where they liked autographs. But my grandmother brought us to a card show, my brother and I, when we were 9 or 10, and this is back in 1980, 81, somewhere in there. And it kind of got started there. By that time, I was already collecting baseball cards. And then I started buying some autographs and getting more interested in it there. And then at the same time, and actually right before that, started getting autographs at the ballpark as a kid. So it all kind of started in that spot. And then the more you did it, the more your eyes opened, the more you wanted to do it. And throughout the 80s, I went from just being at the ballpark with a baseball, and I still have them, where like there's 15, 20 guys of just all different teams and old timers. But then it elevated to where I started doing it with cards and photos. And, as the years evolved, you start saying, well, baseball's cool, but, how about basketball? So in the 87, 88, I started doing basketball, and then football in 88, and hockey in 88. And then before you know it, and then I'm doing celebrities. I'm like, well, they have to stay somewhere. They're filming a movie in Chicago. Where do they stay? So then I started with doing all that. And then music. Oh, where do these bands stay? I started finding all the bands. And then that whole evolution started throughout the mid to late 80s, all the way through 90s, 2000s. And, I was working at Mastro Auctions at the time, and had gotten to know Jim Spence pretty well, and also gotten at the time, and this is crazy thinking back at it, like 2001 range, PSA was doing a quick opinion for eBay. And their big idea was, hey, it's going to be on the eBay listing page. This is going to be awesome. We might get 1,000 of these a day where people ask for a quick opinion. Well, it never got on the listing page. They wouldn't do it at that time. But PSA wanted to hire me. Jim Spence started talking with the people at PSA more about it. He said, well, I need help. We got to grow the division. And at the time, it was just Jim Spence. Now, when PSA DNA started, it was Jim Spence and like 4 other guys. But Jim took it all to Pennsylvania, ran it out of there. And they basically hired me to work out there as an authenticator in 2001. I started in 2002, and then the rest is history. And it was a great run at PSA. I certainly had a great time. I enjoyed it. I ran the autograph division there from 2005 until I left in 2016, and then we started back at authentication. And recently, some of the news online and stuff as people have seen, and also my YouTube channel is starting to talk more about it. Came with a new agreement with Beckett where I'm just going to serve as a consultant and help train new authenticators and people that are interested in that craft. So it's kind of a new journey for me. And I've had my own company, Grad Collection, with my wife Stephanie and I for about 4 years now, and we set up at the National, and we have a big eBay presence. So it's all been kind of exciting the last couple of years and changing. And I certainly love the business as I've been involved with it literally my entire life.
Yeah. Yeah, well, congratulations on the new setup there, and obviously so much has been changing across the industry in recent years,
Yeah.
and another change there for you as recently as the last few weeks here. So
Yeah.
yeah, congratulations with everything on that.
Thank you.
Um, but yeah, you talk about you know going back to, and that really resonated with me, going back to being a kid at the ballpark getting
Yeah.
autographs. I mean, that's where my first experience with autographs started. It was at the ballpark. I remember I'd go with my family to spring training in Arizona
Yeah.
a number of years as a kid. Um, but yeah, just chasing down autographs, and you talked about a few there, but are there any that kind of in your early days, as a kid, a big autograph you got that really like was like, wow, that was the one I was really chasing and I got it.
I guess, like, when you first start, and I wanted to meet Will Clark and Ricky Henderson and Don Mattingly, I think was one of the bigger ones. And
Mhm.
Canseco McGuire during that whole 87, 88, 89 range, and meeting all those guys, and God, Reggie Jackson. And then I met him. And before you know it, that's where I think fuels all of it too. And you want to keep meeting these guys. And I think I had experience with, kind of, doing it at the ballpark when I was a little kid. About 1986, a friend of mine goes, and I lived out in the Chicago suburbs, Orland Park. Um, so a friend of mine goes, "Hey, weird thing, but uh, I know where Carlton Fisk lives." I'm like, "Really?" So he lived a town or two over, and not more than 10 minutes from where I grew up. And yeah, he's like he's out there all the time doing yard work. And turns out Fisk was avid yard worker. He grew flowers, did all this stuff. So we go up there one day, and he's got this big driveway that goes up, and I see him right up there. I see him. There's Fisk. He's raking. So I just went over there and started talking to him. I mean, for me at least, that was the guy that I really wanted to get to know. And I had met him in 82 or 83 at a restaurant in Chicago after a game. Him and Greg Luzinski were together, who I love watching both those guys play. So I'm a big Sox guy, if you can't tell. But, it's just that passion of like meeting people, getting him in person. One of the big celebrities I got when I was younger was Schwarzenegger. Him and Jim Belushi were throwing out the first pitch at Comiskey Park, promoting Red Heat. I think it was about 1988, and I remember I ran down to where they came out of the clubhouse. I knew right where they would go. I got their autographs. It was awesome. I was so pumped to meet Schwarzenegger. Then I met him so many times since then. But I think it's just the chase. Meeting people.
Yeah.
The first time I met Metallica, or the guys from the Who, or AC/DC, or all Robert De Niro or Bill Murray, or just kind of once you get it, it's hard to. I'll explain this. Like once you get that bug, it's hard to get rid of it. And I did segue because I moved out to Pennsylvania in 2002, 2003. I did some autograph chasing, but very little. I'd go out to New York a lot to do plays or go do Saturday Night Live. So I still kind of try and stay relevant and chase a little bit, but I'd given up the sports stuff by then. And if I did go chasing, it was mostly celebrities or music stuff. And I just kind of moved in that direction of giving it up and weaning it out. But collecting was still always part of me, and it still is. I've gotten it out of my system though, pretty much. But man, it's hard. It's like, and I I can understand, people get addicted to drinking or drugs, and I think that the collecting is also in that same realm because once you're so in it deep, it's hard to pull back into the reality. And
Hmm.
I'm there now, but it's taken, and I'd started about COVID, and I was able to pull myself out due to a bunch of different circumstances. But once I did that, then I was ready to sell and kind of move on from it and enjoy my life more. Because, the thing is when you've done it for so long and you've been around it for so long, like I have, you really, if you did it the right way, you could enjoy the fruits of your labor. And I'm
Hmm.
doing that now where my collection is working for me. And so that's what I've been able to do with it. So it
Yeah.
was fun, and I think at some point I'd love to write a book about it all. I keep saying like 5 people will read it, but I think it'll
I
be
think
cool
you get
because
a few more than that.
but I just want to chronicle stuff, and I have great
Yeah.
stories and just our business that we're in. I've been to so many nationals. I've been to 30 something nationals. I mean, the first one I went to was in '83, and I've watched that whole evolution and how shows have changed and card shows have changed, and it's been insane to watch
Yeah.
this all happen. The watching the card guys now and how they're so big, and cards are just, they were always cool, but now it's like, oh, they're way cool.
Yeah, well, it's definitely taken a new level, certainly on the,
Yeah.
almost on the investment side. But, as far as the collecting side of things goes, I totally get what you're saying in terms of the kind of addictive element. And I think if you do it
Yeah.
right, hopefully it can be a little bit healthier than an alcohol or drug addiction. But
Wait, I
yeah,
don't
no,
know
it's
though. I've seen the stories lately about guys with the cards and the Pokemon, and there's some very unhealthy addictions.
it can get
Obviously,
out of control. Yeah,
yeah, way
yeah.
out of control.
No, it can get out of control for sure. But yeah, just like, and they talk about sports betting or whatever too, you gotta know your limits,
Yeah,
how much money you can spend and come up with something that's sustainable and that is sustainably fun at the end of the day. I think that's the key. If you're chasing and almost just kind of chasing in a way that's not fun, that's
yeah.
obviously a problem. But if you can keep it fun throughout, then that's key. But yeah, I mean, so as far as when you were talking about kind of uh, meeting all those guys as a kid, I know obviously now you're in the authentication space, so this is a little bit
Yeah.
different than what you do professionally. But as far as advice for young kind of autograph chasers, maybe from your early years of doing that, do you have any advice for like the best way to meet, these people you want to get the autographs of, or any other kind of tips for those collectors that want to still chase autographs?
Well, I mean, that whole thing has evolved too. I mean,
Yeah,
that's gotten crazy. So it's difficult. When I was doing it back in the '80s, when I started, it was not difficult. You could still go meet. You could go see if the Dolphins were playing in Chicago. I You could walk right up to Dan Marino, or if Derek Thomas was with the Chiefs, you definitely see the guy and meet him, or Brett Favre. Now it's different to where security is locked down on teams when they're in town. Players don't really like being bothered at the hotels anymore. And back
yeah,
then there was a number of guys that hated it too, and I understand that. But I'd say if you're starting young, maybe just go to the ballpark. But there's limitations there too, because they have the fencing up, or the nettings all
the
around.
net,
And
yeah,
spring training is probably, if you really want to collect and meet players, is probably still the best way to do it, even though that's a lot different now. And don't have super high expectations. It's not like Shohei Ohtani is signing every day for people. He's not. These guys, some of them just aren't that great about it. And, some guys are just downright not great about wanting to sign for anybody. Little kids, it's a little different. But even in that case, I've watched many player walk by many little kids before. So you just have to, I'd say start off small. And I'd say probably still the best way is by going to a baseball card show or a memorabilia show like the Chicago Sports Spectacular, where they bring in, 70, 80 people, and maybe start that way. And that's what a lot of people do. Of course, you have to pay for that experience in that moment, but at the same time, it might be a way to start. You can budget yourself, and, you know, that's my best advice, because right now the climate is not there for in-person chasing anymore. It's very difficult.
yeah,
People still do it. I've got
yeah,
plenty of people I know that still go out there and they're still going hard, but the climate is not wonderful, and everybody's onto it. Everyone's getting paid anyway, and the
Right.
people who aren't really that nice. So,
Right.
I would definitely say temper yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's maybe even a lot of players and celebrities have kind of, really further understood and taken seriously the commercial side of it, where,
Yeah,
you still can get an autograph at the ballpark. I see it when I go there. I see people going down to the, whatever it is, the left field line, the right field line. But yeah, it might not be the biggest names and people get, and I think, in some cases I kind of get the player's perspective where, you know, they've probably seen one too many people have a huge book of autographs that they're just
yeah.
going to go right and sell on eBay, and it's just a kind of a business for them. And so that's where the commercialization, I get it. They're like, hey, if people are making money on this, then I'm going to sell them. I'm not going to give them away for free. So I get that side of it. And so,
But but don't forget this too. Don't forget this perspective. I understand that. And I think that there's a time and place for everything. Like premieres are a good place, but there's
yeah,
so many people and it's very difficult. Los Angeles, New York. That's when people like, that's where people like to sign if they do. Except, I know he's unfortunately, I'm not trying to say anything ill will, but Bruce Willis was notorious for not being really that nice of a guy throughout his life as an approachable actor. At premieres, he would just wave to people, maybe shake some hands. But that's where, the Tom Cruises, they don't mind signing. And I just saw a picture of Tom Cruise the other day in somewhere, LA or something, and he gets on his motorcycle and people are trying to ask him and he just rides away. Doesn't want to be
right.
bothered. But at premieres is where that's too. So if you have that going for you, maybe that's something to do too. But it's all about having information, about knowing where to wait. And it takes a long time to cultivate that stuff. It's not like all of a sudden you just know how to do it. It took me a long time to learn. And I had a friend in Chicago who started collecting in the 70s. Unfortunately passed away 2008. But he started in about 1972 doing in-person stuff. And he went all the way through his life. He kept going up until he died. And he was an in-person guy, did in-person chasing, and he was insane about it. And he taught me a lot about how to do it, what to look out for. And I think common sense plays a big part in it. You have to have something up here, and it's puzzle. It's putting together a puzzle at times, figuring out where people stay, where to go get them. The timing is all crazy. Like, what time should I get there? It's like, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to
Yeah,
undertake,
a
and it really
logistics,
is.
yeah, a
Yeah,
logistics whole setup. But
absolutely.
yeah, no, no, absolutely. And it's yeah, and I think another thing with the autographs is it shows that you met that person too. It's
Yeah.
the autograph almost as a representation that, hey, I, either shook this guy's hand or got to spend 10 seconds saying a couple things to him and, we spoke. Um, so that's kind of a cool representation of what an autograph is too, I think.
Yeah, I think and that's why it's kind of a cool collectible. And there is stuff that I would say I would have a hard time parting with that were autographs or collectibles or things I've gotten, and I had moved my grad collection office recently and I was going through a bunch of old stuff and I'm like, what do I do with this stuff? It's worthless to anybody else, but to me, it's kind of cool. I don't know what to do with
Yeah.
it. I'm perplexed. I mean, I don't mind getting rid of stuff, and at some point, it's never. When I leave planet Earth, it's not going with me. So I got to figure out what to do with it. But some stuff is really tough to part with, and my is a juxtapose. My wife, she came into this whole thing, and I met my wife 2019, and she had no idea what any of this stuff was. She's a social worker, so she was like, "What is this stuff? People collect this? Is that for real?" She had no idea, and now her door's been open to all of it, and she's just like, "My God, this is crazy." But she constantly tells me, "What are you going to do with it all? Are you going to give it
Yeah.
to your kids if you die, or me, or whatever?" And she's like, "I don't want it. Your kids aren't going to want it." And at the end of the day, that's, my friend John died in 2008. Um, he still lived with his mom. He had had a son through a girlfriend, but he had no will. and there was no one next in line, so it ended up going to probate court, and it ended up getting auctioned or sold off. So it's like these guys collect all this stuff all these years, and then that's what kills me, is they don't get to enjoy it. Like, and that's this thing that really bothers me. So, more advice, if I had to give it to you, is like,
Yeah.
there's a Seattle collector who died in the last year, and he did music and celebrities, and he lived a lousy life the last few years of his life. He had all kinds of problems with his internal organs and was always sick. And, you know, like if you saw him, you'd be like, God, this guy's got no money. He had nothing, zero. But he had literally hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars with this stuff, hundreds of thousands. But he didn't get to enjoy any of it. He died, and then his friends sold it all off for his family. That's
Yeah.
He don't get to enjoy it. So I want to enjoy it. So, like I keep saying, fruits of your labor. Well, enjoy it, but also realize that, hey, you can enjoy what you're doing too. And like people always say, well, I'll do it when I'm retired. And I'm like, well, you don't even know if you're going to make it till you're retired. You know what I mean? You might not even make it that far. So you got to go
Yeah.
enjoy it. And
Yeah.
that's kind
Yeah.
of been my
Whatever
whole
it
thing.
is. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you have
Yeah,
to.
absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. And that, goes for whatever you're doing in the collecting space is, yeah, as long as you get enjoyment out of it. But, one more, I guess, kind of advice question I'll ask you in terms of collecting autographs. So like we talked about, it's become so much more commercialized. And I think there's
Yeah,
you can say there's bad things about that, but to an extent it kind of is what it is, I think. As far as the people chasing autographs at shows and things like that, do you have any uh advice or any, experience? You said you've been to the National for 30 years, whatever it is, 30 plus years. Any
yeah, it's
advice
a
for
lot.
getting autographs at shows?
Um, just choose them right. I always say this much. It's like I see people signing at these shows, and I look at people like Johnny Bench. Great autograph, you know, one of the greatest catchers of all time, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. But these guys have been around so long and circulated so long, their autographs are just not worth a lot of money anymore. And what you're paying for them, you're paying more for that experience. And people do, hey, I want to meet Dave Winfield. All right, cool. Loved watching Dave Winfield play. He was a great player. Or, I want to collect Hall of Famers and guys like that, Winfield, Ozzie Smith, and those type of players. Thing is, they unfortunately the price tag is high on guys like that. Um, but if you're looking to resell it or get out of it, you're going to lose money on it, because it's just not. If you're going to do it for the love of it and someone you want to meet and collect. And I don't have a problem with that. But just realize that not everything you're getting and paying for is really worth it. And at least in my opinion, it's not. I mean, it's hard to pay $150 for Brian Urlacher. Like, great player, loved him watched football, super nice guy. Know Brian personally, he's a great guy, but his autograph just isn't worth that type of money. Or Mike Singletary, their value is lower because there's so much quantity out. And another side of the business that a lot of people don't know about is all the obligations these guys have taken on in terms of private signings. They're retired now, and they've got free time on their hands. A lot of them do, and they don't mind getting paid to sign, and that stuff gets out there in the marketplace. Like Frank Thomas is probably the prime example. And when he played, Frank Thomas was a decent signer. I met him many times. We got him in Chicago a lot, and he was one of the best players of all time. I mean, his two back-to-back MVPs, and he's an incredible player. I mean, just love Frank Thomas. But Frank Thomas now has gotten to the point where the last 4 or 5 years he signs so much that his autograph is a $30 card. I mean, it's hard to believe. Like, go look at his numbers. They're as good as anybody in the Hall of Fame, but his autograph is just not worth anything. So it's, if you're paying to meet him at a show, you're paying just to meet him, get the autograph, but his autograph, unfortunately, is just not worth a lot of money. And I try to tell people that too sometimes. I'm like, maybe it's just better to do the photo op, because the photo ops
Yeah.
are as much as the autographs now. Just do the photo op, because you could find the autograph in the secondary market, certified and on anything you want pretty much, for a cheap price. And that is the case with a lot of Hall of Famers. And if you go back and look at guys who retain their value pretty well, it's a tough one. Go look at great pitchers of all time. Steve Carlton, his autograph is not worth a lot of money. Sandy Koufax, he's retained value because he quit doing shows years ago, and he just does a private signing or two a year, and that's about it. He stays out of that. So it's tough. Just pick and choose, and don't. I would say know the marketplace too. Like you got to know what stuff
Yeah.
is worth if you're going to go pay for it. It's important
Yeah.
you have a good knowledge base and educate yourself. Educate, educate, educate. My big thing always. Um, Learn about it. I mean, we have a marketplace out there you can go look at. You can go look in Golden, go look in Heritage, go look on eBay. You could go look at any big auction house and you could see what stuff's going for. And it's good to follow market trends and see where things are going. So, um,
Yeah.
that's just kind of the best way for me to say it without telling you your autograph isn't worth much money. The experience counts. So that's part of it. And that's a cool part of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the experience is, you know, like I was saying before, it's kind of the autograph is a representation
Yeah.
of getting to meet that guy, enjoy the time of, asking a couple questions, getting if you can a photo op. Maybe it's an
Yeah.
either or thing depending on, what show you're at. Um but yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I want to shift it a little bit to game used. Obviously, this is the
Sure.
game used podcast. So in terms of I'm sure you get pieces that you've worked on frequently over the years that are game use pieces that uh, have an autograph on them that you've been asked to authenticate. And I know in the game use world, it's kind of split. Some people like an autograph on a game use piece. They think
Yeah.
it adds, some significance. Some people think it gets in the way. They want to see the use on the jersey, a big autograph, especially in a place they don't like it. Some game use collectors don't like it. So it can go either way, but talk about kind of what you've seen in terms of game use pieces that have come through and, you know, how frequently of the items that you were authenticating were they game use pieces?
I'd say the percentages were mostly contained to auction houses. So,
Yeah.
we would see a lot of game use stuff, and I can go back through the years because I have been going to any auction house you could think of. I've been there. And that Golden Heritage, but SCP, REA, Hunt auctions. I've seen all kinds of great game use stuff. That's crazy. I mean, just crazy stuff. But that's where it usually comes. Now, would I say people submit that stuff for authentication? Occasionally, we would get at the office in PSA when I was there at Beckett, but most of the time it seems confined to just the auction house type thing. The Mickey Mantle jersey that went for a few years ago, what'd they go for? Crazy money, 10
The
million,
one
something
that
like
got
that.
over 4 million. Yeah.
Maybe at the four that one, that was a great jersey. That was signed. So we authenticated the autograph when I was at Beckett. I know I did Gretzky jersey maybe in the last year. That was crazy. A Hank Aaron, maybe the 54 Hank Aaron jersey. Obviously game used Ruth bats. I think I've done one game used signed Gehrig bat. It's always cool seeing that stuff and kind of holding history in your hands. I think I had Pete, we authenticated, I know it's a game used, but not a game used piece, but the game used baseball that Pete Rose used to break Ty Cobb's record. That was years ago at PSA. Johnny Unitas helmet and Peyton stuff and Peyton jerseys. I always get a kick out of looking at some of these jerseys and the wear and tear that is on them. It's crazy. And then the Jordan stuff. Now, Jordan stuff I'd say is more plentiful. That it. I know that Jordan did wear sometimes multiple jerseys a game, and Charitables was involved in giving out stuff and auctioning stuff. And I've seen a lot of Jordan game new stuff. That's crazy, and I've got a friend that's still holding on to some great, great stuff that I don't think anyone even knows he has it. He's in California and he's been hoarding Jordan game used stuff starting in like the early 90s. So he's got some great stuff just sitting in his house. And I'm like, man, he's got great shoes. He's got game used basketball signed by him. He's got full uniforms. I mean, he's got some amazing
Mm.
stuff. And I see that stuff I see that type of stuff whenever we visit, or in the past, I visited, so many places, and getting to see it in person. I'll tell you the truth is really kind of cool. And I had started taking pictures the last, occasionally I did it years ago, but like the last 5 or 6 years, I'm like, I got to get a picture of me with this. This is the piece of history. I have to. So it kind of evolved into that because I was like, that's a great piece of history. I want a chance to hold that. Or, when you hold a signed Roberto Clemente bat, that's cool. And he signed those, and same could be said for all the greats. I've seen their signed bats. If they signed them, I've definitely held them in my hands or seen game used stuff for years. And it is just,
Yeah.
I've always been intrigued by it. I wish I collected it more. But I've always been extremely intrigued by it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and the other thing, I'm always looking for the next piece for resolution. So if next time you talk to your friend in California, if he hasn't already, have him send that stuff over for
Yeah, I
photo
will for
matching with
sure.
us at resolution.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
100%.
yeah. Well, the other thing I'll say on the resolution side of things is, the argument of are autographs good or bad on game use pieces, and I think they can be cool personally. I think, get them signed. The one thing I'll say, please don't get them to sign it right over, a big ball mark or a big characteristic that's relevant for photo matching. We've seen that
Yeah.
not too often, but here and there we'll see it, and it's like, just get the autograph somewhere else on the piece. But
Well, that's a good point. I had an instance where I was nervous about it. So I think in 2000, maybe I think I'll go back 2009. I bought Carlton Fisk game used road rookie flannel that he used the whole first half of the season and in 72. It was the pants and the shirt. And at the time, the auction house was sourcing stuff from a guy who was getting stuff from the Red Sox organization for years. And so at the time, there's no photo matching, but I had plenty of photos that I was sitting there trying to line stuff up. And it was without a doubt was the jersey and it was authenticated at the time. And I wanted to get Fist to sign it. And I ended up getting it signed, but on the inside back to where, in case someone did, if there was a photo resolution or photo matching thing at some point, I didn't want to take away from the outside of the jersey. And I got the pants signed too, but I got them all signed on the inside. I got them signed on the inside. So Fist remembered the jersey. Fisk remembered putting it on, how much he hated hearing it. And he's like, I remember this is my first gamer on the road. Yeah. And he said we wore that half the season and maybe they switched to knit after that or something, but it was awesome. I mean, he might even wore it in 71 too, but I'm
yeah,
sure he did. I've so many photos around it, but I hear what you're saying because I have, if you think about it, like with the Mantle stuff and, a lot of stuff came from Barry Helper and his collection. And, I know he had a lot of stuff autographed by those guys. And I think it was just a thing. And I still see, even going back to Heritage, the last few visits I was there, they'd have a lot of great jerseys, but they're signed. A lot of them will be signed on the front. It just seemed like the thing to do, and
mm,
there's very few times where someone would be like, I'm not sure if that's a great idea or I shouldn't get that sign there. And I've also seen a lot of bad autographs on jerseys that are real. So, that happens too. It sucks,
yeah.
but
That's
it
brutal.
definitely
That's
happens.
got to be the worst case if you have a real game used piece with a fake autograph on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the worst combination right there.
Well, as I
But
would call them, the Jordan Secretarials that came out, the Secretarial signatures, the stuff that came from the team. So many of those had bad Jordan autographs on them. So, and I've seen a ton of them, and
yeah.
it's really unfortunate.
And so talk about that a little bit if you could. So when you say the secretarial, that's something where someone else with the team was signing kind of on Jordan's behalf.
Yeah. So throughout his career, Jordan would. I mean, you can imagine what kind of mail he was getting. His
Mm,
popularity was crazy. Jordan didn't sign his mail. So he had at one time, if you sent to his foundation, they send you back a signed 8x10 with a stamp on it. Um, People when he was very young would send to Nike. They had a stamp. Then somebody with the Bulls started using an auto pen on Jordan about 89, 90 range. And also in that range would be, I'd say about 88 up until even 92, 93. Someone was doing Jordan secretarial signatures, but the secretarial signature was of Jordan like from 85. So the person doing it for the Bulls, even in like 88, 89, 90, was doing like his 85 style signature. It was that person was there for a long time doing those, by the way. I mean, he might even been there in 85, 86, but that stuff was coming out still in 88, 89, where the signature style mimicked his rookie era signature. And I see him all the time. I see him almost every day. A lot of that stuff was given to the charity side to auction off. And like I said, I've seen it on game used shoes, seen it on game used jerseys. I've seen it on Bulls basketballs, NBA basketballs, kind of constant because
yeah.
I think Jordan got to the point, and if you think about his popularity, I was chasing Jordan back then in Chicago, and he was always accessible. There was never one time up until their first championship, he wasn't accessible. it never would have an issue if going for his autograph. We used to go out to the practice facility and get his autograph all the time. They would fly commercial back in 88, 89. Go get his autograph all the time. I think 89 they switched to private, but 88 they were flying out of O'Hare, United Airlines. So we were able to go get his autograph, and he became inaccessible after the first championship. Then after that, it was like done. You're not getting
Mhm.
near him anymore. And I think as his popularity kept growing and growing, and he just didn't have time to address that stuff, so the team just took care of it for him, and that
Yeah,
makes sense to me. You know,
totally makes sense.
yeah. But I think if a Charles Barkley said, "Hey, sign those shoes for me after the game," and have someone send them over, Jordan would sign them, make sure he signed them. But there were times where Jordan wasn't signing stuff, and
Mhm.
I've seen that stuff. There's not been one trip to a major auction house I've done where in the last 10 years where I don't see one. So
Yeah. Yeah, it totally makes sense in terms of a guy only having so much time in the day. I get that. If you're Michael
exactly.
Jordan, you can't sign everything that is requested of you. Now, I would be of the stance of, just sign less, don't be using the fake signature, obviously. But
Right.
so what is that for people that don't know as much about the different terms in the autograph world, the auto pen versus the secretarial. Explain what those mean.
So secretarial is it's almost it could be going back to that we call documents signed back in by former presidents proxy signed. I mean, it's almost a type of proxy signer, secretarial, and it's just a common term that we use in the business just to describe someone signing your name for you. But you could say proxy sign, but secretarial we just use that. There's also clubhouse signed where we use that too for Jordan. Kind of goes hand in hand. So we could say, yeah, the clubhouse guy or the locker room guy signed it. And that goes for baseball too and football too. Walter Payton did not sign all those team balls through those years. Instead, someone else would sign all the big names on them. And Payton is pretty rare on team balls, especially from like the mid 80s. Signed very few of them. So those things did happen because you just have to think about it. They're getting tons of mail. They're getting fans everywhere they go. If it's on the road or if it's at home, they've got people all around them. And I think it's just a natural reaction like, hey, can you help me manage this? And it's the same thing that celebrities have turned to in the past where, hey, I just wrote to Al Pacino and I got his autograph back. Well, his secretary signed it, or Robert De Niro or Schwarzenegger. And people also use the auto pen machine. And you've probably heard it through the years. Wayne Gretzky had a book release, I want to say maybe 10 years ago, maybe in that range somewhere, maybe 8 years ago. It might even be closer to eight, 7, 8. And all of them were auto pen. And that seems to be more of a kind of a trend now. John Bon Jovi releases a new CD, you order it, and you get an auto pen back. So it happens. I mean, at least Taylor Swift doesn't do that. She respects her fans and she signs that stuff. But I would say what 100% it's become more of a trend. And you just have to know this. You have to, that's all about educating yourself and collecting. And that's what kind of feel, quite frankly, is kind of going to have to be my rest of my career goal and life goal that I want to be able to give back. And that was my whole message with Beckett too, is I want to be able to give back what I've learned. And, it, I was kind of thrown to the wolves when I started doing autograph authentication. I mean, the first day I worked for PSA, I was at the Fort Washington show, set up taking in autographs for Jim Spence. So, you know, now I want to find a way to get the guys and the whoever wants to do it just to more of an education on it and what it's about. Because, if you're, let's say 25 years old and you want to be an authenticator. Okay. So you're just say, hey, I want to do this. This sounds like a cool job. And plenty of people tell me that. But you need an education too. You have to know about handwriting. You have to know how people sign, different pressures, overlapping, shading, the sizing, angles. And you have to pay attention to that stuff. And then you have to understand that there's clubhouse signers and secretarial signers and auto pen machines and people using auto pens now, like Brett Lemieux was the forger from Indianapolis who killed himself recently over the summer after his forgery scheme went down the drains. They start using auto pens, and you have to be very careful in the marketplace. It is really kind of crazy what's out there. And education, education, education. So I'm hoping to be able to bring that back. Obviously, doing it through Beckett. I'm going to do more of it through my YouTube channel because I want to give back to people. And
Yeah.
I think it's really important, you know, because if you think about this, it's only a select number of experts who have this knowledge base in here. You know what I mean? And the guys that I worked with at Beckett are very knowledgeable. They've seen a lot. You know, PSA, JSA, I can't speak for all of them. I know Jim Spence, and he was very educated about it, and I learned a lot from Jim. And Jim could go on for 6 years talking straight about autocrats. He loves it. And Jim gave me a great education on it. But I think it's important to pass it on. So, you know,
Yeah. That's awesome.
coming on your show or coming on my YouTube channel, I'm going to have all that kind of content where people could learn about a Michael Jordan Secretarial, because quite honestly, there's just a little smidge of people that know it.
Mhm.
So I'm not giving away anything. I'm just helping. You know, I want to help educate. So, you know, you're not somewhere and you see a Jordan Raw and be like, oh man, I want to get this. I'm going to buy that. And, you know, it turns out Secretarial. And that stinks. Or an auto pen, which we see all the time. So
And
they're
so
out
the
there.
auto pen, I want to jump in on
Mhm.
the auto pen. So this is an actual machine that
It is. Yeah.
uses real ink, but it has this like a robot that's signing it basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten more. I'll say this much: they're the ones that Lemieux was using. I they kind of like maybe about this big. It's hard to explain, but about this big, and it's just the pen goes in there, reads off of a matrix, so you program it to sign a certain way. And in his case, he was doing all kinds of stuff, baseballs and footballs and jersey numbers. The AutoPen machine originally was really developed late 40s, early 50s, and it was used by politicians, mostly presidents, because they just, you know, guys, they couldn't handle that volume of stuff to sign. And Kennedy was the first one who really widely used it, along with 15 secretaries to sign for him. So Kennedy had a whole plethora of things. But Kennedy, I mean, it was there for Ike, but I think Ike used it a little bit, but mostly Kennedy. And then it started after that, and it became like, holy cow, man, auto pen. Then politicians would use it. Then famous people started using it because it was just easier. And that's how their correspondence got done, was via an auto pen machine, which just signed their name for them. You could put a pen in there, you could put a marker in there. They're more advanced now, obviously. And we saw a rash of auto pen type signatures on Funko Pops, maybe about 4 years ago. And it started maybe five, somewhere in that range, maybe about 2018. Someone in Europe was using an auto pen machine to mimic celebrities on Funko Pops. And that got out of hand for a while. So that stuff's still out there. And then we see them on jerseys still. So it's like they're out there and they're very good. You know, the thing about an auto pen, and if I go back into history, they're the best way to describe them, they're clunky. They'd have a start point, a stop point, and if you know, looked at it closely enough, you might see shakiness because some of them had trouble circling or going up. So, and they had stops, little pressure points. You turn it over on the back, it had all the same pressure. No one signs with the same pressure. Your hand's always going to be uneven if you're signing something. You might have the same autograph, look the same autograph, but if you sign a piece of paper 100 times, you're going to have different pressures. The auto pen was the same. So they're very prevalent. And I kind of fear for our future wave of authenticators, because that's you have to learn a lot of that stuff, man. And if you're 25 years old, you better fill your head with it and learn it, because that's what the forgers are going to now, is auto pen machines. I just saw an Otani yesterday that was an auto pen on a card. So people are using them more and more and more. It's become more prevalent, and I think that they're getting better and better and better too. So
Yeah, I mean that makes sense with the rise of, just the advance of technology over the
yeah.
years. But, you talk about education. I want to take a moment, plug your YouTube channel. Where can people hear from you on YouTube?
I think on my YouTube channel, it's under Steve Grad, or just ask Steve Grad. I
Oh,
think that's the handle I have on it. Just have one thing up, but more content's coming in the coming weeks, and I've kind of got a whole game plan now of how I want to get that out there. And really, it's going to serve as an education to people, and it's going to be multifaceted about the industry. And you know, it's always been like, there's stuff you do behind the door, the authentication part of it. I've always been a big fan of doing stuff in private with the team, but I'm also okay with explaining to people how to do this stuff. So I think that's important. And,
Yeah.
like I said before, I think the education part is important. There's some books out there, but some of them are poorly written. There's a Charles Hamilton book that I still have sitting somewhere that is great for autographs and authentication. I think it's one of the first big books written about it, from the 60s. But there's not a lot new stuff out there on it. I want to get that out there. And I
Yeah.
think people need to know. People need to know about the forger from Detroit, Hankel. They need to know about the guys out in Cincinnati doing it, or the guys in Southern Illinois that does it, or the guy in Oakland that does it. And they have to know about the guys in New York that used to do it 20 years ago, or the guy down in Florida who's still doing it all the time. So I think it's important that people understand that it's still going to be prevalent. And as long as there's collectibles, there's going to be forgeries and fakes. It's never changing. It's never going away. And the guys I felt that are like good, they tend to stay. I always talk about this Mendoza line. We know about Mario Mendoza, the 200 hitter. The guys that were doing well and successful, I mean, they're bad guys, don't get me wrong, but they stay here. They're not going up here, and that's where their success came from. And if you got a guy that's pumping out rare basketball, baseball, football names all the time on trading cards, and there's a couple of them that do it. There's a guy in Cincinnati, and then there's a guy in Southern Illinois, and a guy in Oakland. That's what they do. They stay under that line. But they've been doing it for years. So they've been putting out guys for years and years and years, and they've put out guys that are so tough on cards, and they're staying in the 2, 3, 400 range all day long. They don't really go up here. They're not messing around with Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, and they're not doing Clemente, because no one could forge Clemente anyway, because that signature. I could dissect it someday. It's crazy, but no one's forging him successfully. So they just stay out here, and they do a good job of it. And
Yeah. So
that
why
stuff,
is it then? Yeah, why is it if these guys, these are known people, why can't, the FBI or whoever it is, why can't they go get these guys?
that's small beans. It really is. I
Yeah.
mean, Hankel. I think Hankel went down. They were working on Hankel for years and years and years. Then he was an artist, and he did artwork before he got into doing sports and celebrity stuff. And I think that's kind of what kind of triggered it too a little bit. Art experts were looking at some of these paintings, and then you could get the paint tested, and the paint's not coming back right. There's some problems with it, and it's not from the era it's supposed to be. It's modern post World War II. So, his inks he was using, he did a good job of aging his inks, but any kind of ink analysis, if you get it done, by the way, that's very expensive. But a lot of the inks were post World War II stuff, and he's forging guys from like the 20s and 30s. So, I would just say, like, people get caught, they get stupid, they do stuff like that. And I think it's important we all know about it, and I think I've talked a lot about Hankel. It's been out there published. He's been a guy that was chased for years, and I'm glad the feds finally did something. But it's hard. It's really hard. Like there's a guy in McKinney, Texas. Beckett won a lawsuit against him recently. He was another guy putting stuff out there in the marketplace, and he was, he had bad stickers and all that stuff. And they knew about him for years. I mean, years and years and years, but it just took a push to local law enforcement to get involved. It's sometimes that. And, you've got to have people that have gotten ripped off and people that come forward. And, it's hard. It's he said, she said too, with a lot of the stuff, like, oh, I don't believe that Bader's real. Well, why? Well, you're an autograph expert. That's fine. But how about this expert? He says it's good. That's why in our business, unfortunately, we've had the guys that are out there that aren't good. The Don Frangipanis of the world. The guy I replaced on Pawn Stars was not really good at this stuff. And there's still a couple guys out there that do the same thing, that are just, they give autographs a bad name because they're putting certs on fake stuff, and they do it no problem. They do it willingly. So I'd love to see all that eradicated. I think it's a tough haul, though. I just don't think the feds could chase all that down. And I wish they could. It usually takes local law enforcement to really get their hands into it.
Get started on it. Yeah. So getting back to the education side of things, like you say, there's certain stuff I'm sure that is to some degree trade secrets, but you're talking about you want to educate people more. So, and you're going to do that on your YouTube page. Maybe
Yeah.
give us a little sneak peek here on the show. Talk a little bit about, some of the biggest things that you have used over the years, whether it's, the arching, whatever the terms are for the biggest things that you're looking for and what makes an autograph legitimate versus illegitimate.
Well, I'll give you a good example. Babe
Yeah.
Ruth was one, and Hankel, God, he hit Babe Ruth very well. He's spectacular. But where we caught him and where he screwed up, he was inscribing things to people. They were signed to Joe, best wishes, Babe Ruth. Okay. It should be to Joe from Babe Ruth. Babe Ruth was a big personalizer, and they're all over the place. But Ruth had a certain way of doing things. And then you look at that and you're like, well, that's weird. Because Ruth, and I could think of my exemplars and just all the years I've had doing this. I've seen Babe Ruth write best wishes just a handful of times, maybe 5 times ever that I have ever seen it and documented it. It just was that rare. And it might be to a really special friend or someone he liked a lot. Well, we caught Hankel screwing up inscriptions. And then you start looking at the autograph even more and you're like, well, wait a minute. The A is not right. The overlapping is not right. And in his last name, the B looks like a boomerang. Ruth doesn't do that. And then Ruth's E, the E, when he leaves off his last name and Babe, he's going somewhere, but his don't go anywhere. Like Ruth was going to the R, the where he started his R. Ruth would just lead up and he'd fly right into his R. And he doesn't do that. And you're like, huh, well, these are all crap. And you start seeing them and they're done so well. And you see a baseball, like, oh my God, the one of the balls I rejected for an auction house back in 2008, it was the most spectacular root ball in existence. It would be, I don't know what it would even go for now, because we really haven't seen a super high-end Ruth ball sell recently. We've seen nice ones, but I mean, this might be $1 million ball now, or $1.5 million, maybe 2 million. It was that crazy, but it was fake. And it was definitely no good. And it was a forgery from this guy and from Hankum. And he was just that good at doing them. And that's kind of where we caught that. And I mentioned stuff like overlapping and the sizing and the spacing, because each signer has a rhythm. And forgers, what they don't do right is they don't have that rhythm, because you don't know Babe Ruth. Yeah, I never saw him sign either, but I've known enough about him and studied enough about his autograph, and Mel Ott and Jimmy Fox, and they all had a rhythm to their signing. And I've seen all their writing many times, and their handwriting. They all had a rhythm. Everyone did. John Kennedy, as sloppy as he was, he had a rhythm when he signed his name and when he wrote notes and stuff. You could tell. And forgers don't know that. And that's something that you could go back to when people started forging stuff, probably in the 1800s. They still don't know the rhythm of someone. They don't really know that. And that's something I'm going to hopefully be able to get across to people and let people understand, because I think that's important, because that's something, if you like autographs, you want to know about that. Now, it might be boring speak to some people. I get that. And you know what? Some baseball card talk is boring to me too. I get that. But this is interesting stuff if you're an autograph collector, and you should know it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the rhythm, that totally makes sense, and that's to
Yeah.
me that's fascinating. But all right, well, I want to get back to, one of your guys, and obviously Game Use podcast here. You have a few pieces behind you. Can you show us a
Yeah.
little bit about, you have some Carlton Fisk there?
Yeah. Yeah. Too much. So, back in, I'd say
That's awesome.
1989. Yeah. So spring training, I'm at spring training, and the Sox had a new stadium built down there in Sarasota, but they had to dress at the old stadium. So, and I think it was called Ed Smith. Both of them might have been called Ed Smith, but the old stadium in downtown Sarasota, cool old stadium. And Fisk, by that time, I knew him. So I come up to him there, and he's with Mark Sullivan, who is just a backup catcher, never even played for the Sox, but was in spring training with them. And he's throwing his bag in his car. He's like, oh, we change here, but we go to the new ballpark. And I'm like, I didn't even know that. I'm down there getting autographs. He's like, just follow me over. So I follow Fisk to the new stadium. And I parked next to him, and I pulled out this bat, and I go, well, I wanted you to sign this bat. He goes, where did you get, not this one. He goes, where'd you get that bat? He was mad. He grabbed it out of my hands. He's like, that is good wood. He's like, someone stole that right out of my locker. He's like, how about I do this? I'll give you this gamer, which he had this on here because I think he broke his, let me see if I got this right. Yeah, he broke his right hand, I think, the year before. So he had like an extra cushioning on there. It's got the nice 72. Where am I at? Did I get that right? Okay, 72 on there. But he has this on there and he goes, I'll give you this gamer for that. So
Mhm.
that's one of my favorite pieces. It's got phenomenal use on it. And that's one of my favorites. Um, I think I'm a White Sox fan. So one of my favorite stories is, and I'm going to grab these because there's four
Yeah.
baseballs. And since they're all alike, they're not all alike. So if people remember this, if you're a Yankee fan, there's a player named Andy Hawkins. Andy Hawkins threw a no-hitter against the White Sox, but the White Sox won. That is a game ball from that game. And I don't know if he just had, he was a good collector, but Jeff Torborg was a former White Sox manager. And years ago, he auctioned off a lot of his stuff, and this was in there. And so that's that. That's a game ball from there. Signed by Andy Hawkins as well. I think that's a cool
Yeah.
piece. I was at the game. It was
Yeah.
there. This is a game ball, also, I think from Torborg too, from the final game ever. Oh, no, this is the first game. This is first game at New Comiskey Park, signed by all the umpires. This is last game used baseball. So those things, I have to be honest, I'm not going to be able to ever get rid of those. Okay. I mean, the Andy Hawkins one, I went to the game with my brother, my mom. My mom's no longer here, my dad. And I don't, I could never get rid of that. Like I just give it to my kids or somebody. And then this was probably from one of the best games I think I've ever seen in my life. I wasn't there. I wish I was. But Mark Salas was a former major league player. For years, he was a bullpen coach or catcher for the White Sox. This came from him and he notated it, but this is a ball from Mark Burley's perfect game. And,
Mm.
perfect games happen, they're out there. But if you go back and watch that one, Dwayne Wise made the amazing catch with one
Mhm.
out. I think Gabe Kapler fly ball to left center field, and he had the ball jumped up to grab it, and it came out of his glove. When he's falling, and he grabs it and saves it and saved the no hitter, and that's a ball from that game. So that's a very special ball
Mm.
too, and I would
Yeah.
have a tough time getting rid of that. Another one of my favorite players is Harold Baines. So this is
Hall
old
of
school
Famer.
right there. I I was able to photo match this thing just looking, but I'll send this to you guys at some point. But he wrote on here my rookie gamer,
Mm.
and this thing has insane use to it. This one, and then that's Mike Squires, I think. Yeah, I think that's or Mark Hill, maybe. Yeah, that's Mark Hill, and that's Mike Squires, all from the same collection. Which these have really great use on them. But it's kind of rare to see helmets from that era. I don't really see a lot of them. And I think they're really neat. But Baines, one I love, and he's one of my favorite players. And I've gotten to know him too. Yeah, more through the years. I was more of a pest to him as a chaser. But now he sees me. He's like, "Hey, man, get over here. Let's talk." And then two more pieces I pulled out
Yeah.
here. Uh, let's see. Terrell Baines again, game used hat. Uh, inscribed by him, and then with his number on there.
It's the number.
That's
Yeah.
just a cool new era hat. And then, of course, Carlton Fisk, about 87, I think, 88 game used. With that's his numbering right there. That's him doing
Mm.
that. So, and then I do have more, but Frank Thomas stuff from 93, 94, the batting glove and the Franklin. I have a whole set of these that I had
Yeah.
him sign too with 90, I think 93, 94 MVP.
Yeah.
So,
That's awesome.
it,
All
yeah,
things White Sox.
and I just, speaking about Fisk, because I could talk about Fisk, I think in maybe their March auction, or I don't know when the next big heritage is, I have a Fisk rookie game that's in there and a Frank Thomas jersey. So, I'm parting with some stuff here. Okay.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hard to
Well,
get rid
there.
of Fisk stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Yeah. If you're any of the listeners out there are looking for a Carlin Fisk piece, that'll be a good spot to
That's a
check it
great
out
one. And
and put
plus
in some
that,
bids.
that's in there, and his debut ticket signed by him, which is a one of one by PSA. So that's also in there. And that's a really, what's crazy is I talk to ticket collectors all the time, and I know a bunch of them. Finding tickets from Hall of Famers from that era, like let's say that debuted in either the 60s, 70s, almost impossible. And I
Yeah.
think there's one other one that's not signed. that PSA did, but I mean, they're literally impossible. And I think I traded a guy for that ticket because I had Fisk's first home run ticket, which was also impossible. So, and I had lucked upon that. And I met a guy who was a huge Fisk collector, and he said, "Well, I've got his debut ticket signed by." So I took that. So that's
Mm,
now in Heritage, though.
yeah.
And I love this stuff. The jersey I ended up buying in 2009, the rookie jersey, but I ended up selling it about 2011 or 12 because I doubled my money on it, and it was a I spent a lot on it at the time too, but those are all great pieces. And there's stuff, you know, having Harold Baines' helmet from his rookie year to me is kind of cool. And a lot of people tell me, "Oh, he's not really a Hall of Famer." I'm like, "Well, yeah, he is, and he was a great player. I got to watch his entire career, enjoyed all of it, and one of my favorites and stuff like that." That's cool stuff. I wish I could display it. It
Mm,
just, unfortunately, it sits in a bin because I don't have anywhere to display it in my home. So, for the time being, it's just going to sit in a bin and stay protected. And once in a while, I'll look at it like now, like looking at this baseball, knowing I was at this game. And I was at
mhm.
all these games except the Mark Burley one. So I was at opening day here, I was at this opening day, and I was at the Andy Hawkins game, knowing that those were used literally right in front of me and now I
Right.
own them. With this has, they have great provenance and they're just, to me, they're very memorable keepsakes and things I would have a tough time ever parting with.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's
Don't tell my
awesome.
wife. Don't tell my wife that. All right, that's just between
Yeah.
us.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I can definitely relate in terms of, I think a game used piece from a game you were actually at. I have one. It's a Bryce Miller jersey, just a random starting pitcher for the Mariners currently. But I got the piece, I got the jersey, and then I discovered after I got it that it was from, I think he wore it in 3 or 4 games, whatever it was, and I was at one of the games, and that was like, oh, that's
Oh,
awesome.
that's
Yeah, it
awesome.
definitely adds
That's awesome.
another level.
Hey,
But
tell me one thing though. The photo matching thing is very interesting to me, and I think it's revolutionary. And I think if you do it right, you do it right. You guys are. I see the results and what it changes in terms of financial. It's crazy what it does. And we keep seeing it nonstop. And, I do have to get some of this stuff done. The fist bat, I don't know, would be a tough one to get photo matched because he gave it to me in spring training.
yeah.
I don't know if it was left over from the year before in his bag or he had just gotten us all marked up for spring training. I don't know. I have no idea. But I imagine spring training games are hard to find bats from or, images that you can match up.
Yeah, it definitely can be. I think there's going to be fewer images from spring training than there are obviously from the regular season or the postseason.
Sure.
That's not to say we've never, we've photo matched more than a handful of spring training pieces, but yeah, there's probably going to be less imagery.
Yeah, for sure. I just have to do the Baines helmet at some point. So I'm just
Yeah.
I'll get off my rear end and do that at some point, I promise.
Yeah, no, we'd love to work on them for you. But another question I wanted to ask you on the game use side of things is, obviously you're an expert when it comes to autographs, and I wanted to ask you about pens and the types of pens to use. Do you have a recommendation? Let's say there's someone who owns a game used piece, whether it be a jersey or a bat or a ball. Maybe we take those three. Are there
Yeah.
any pens that you specifically recommend in terms of, the ink will last longer over time? Any recommendations in that way?
Well, that's a good question because if I go back to this one, so this was signed for me with a blue, not a Sharpie, but a vis-a-vis, which is a little different. And they don't make them anymore, but I know I got them signed with that. This is signed in 89. I think this has held up pretty good. I haven't really
Yeah,
had it
that looks
displayed
real
much or
strong.
anything. So that was done back then. And I always felt like on these type of bats, Sharpie or a blue vis-a-vis worked pretty well.
Okay.
I never used black and because the issues with black years ago, because the chemicals broke down, it turned yellow after a while. Silver Sharpie is always something that seems to really hold up. And I don't know what brand, and there's so many brands now. I used to use Pen Touch when I collected autographs in person, but there's, Posca makes them now, which are really nice pens and they're easy flowing and they don't bleed. I'd say that this one was done with the paint pen. And I think those are not a silver Sharpie, but a paint pen. And I think they held up. I think they hold up through the, you know, through time pretty well. Um, I don't know if I could trust all the new pens. I see new Sharpies come out and new different kinds of fiber tip markers. I'd say, honestly, that's ballpoint pen. So ballpoint holds up pretty good, black and blue. This was probably blue. It's changed a little bit, but they still hold up decent. So, I mean, I'd still say ballpoint pen. If I look back, this ball was from the last game at Comiskey Park, and that's blue ballpoint right there. So you're looking at something that was done in 1990, and it still stands a test of time. So it just depends too with baseballs. You have to remember this. Back in these eras, especially the 80s, the balls were made in Haiti, in Costa Rica. They weren't using the best water to, when they had to put them in water to soften them. A lot of the water was awful. So the balls changed. That's why you probably see a lot of baseballs from the 80s, especially, and even 90s that have all turned yellow, the balls themselves. So, you could have an autograph on there and it could fade right into it too on some of these baseballs.
And, the bigger culprit there, how much is it pens, the type of pen you use versus obviously sun exposure? We know sun exposure really brings down, autographs. What's like kind of the ratio? Is sun exposure way more important than the pen you use, or
I think sun exposure breaks it down. And I've
yeah,
seen blue vis-a-vis signed on photos in sunlight or even framed in UV, and it'll turn it black. So it
mm,
definitely changes things. You have to be very careful. And I think at the end of the day, if you want to display something fine, I have stuff, 4 or 5 posters upstairs in my den, that are framed, and I know I could lose some of the autographs on them, but I just like them.
right,
I'd say if you have a really good autograph piece, probably don't display it. I mean, you're not going to have a problem with like this pen here. If I had this out actually
yeah,
for like a few years. You're not going to really have an issue with it. But if you get into the blues and blacks a little bit, you might have some problems. So I would
yeah,
be very, very cautious and very leery of that. Well, let me ask you, to a lot of people that have game used jerseys, are they actually displaying them? Because guys that I know, they usually have them, in an archival box, or they're folded, or they're kept in a closet. So they keep them out of sun.
mhm.
And that's the thing to
I've
do.
seen Yeah, I've seen all types. I mean, I personally am a believer, if you have an awesome piece that makes you happy and you have the space to display it, display it.
Yeah.
You can get, obviously they have the UV cases, things like that, that will at least help with the sun exposure. Um, but I'm all for displaying it if you have something cool that like I say, you get excited about. But as far as, what I've seen with various collectors that have been clients of ours, it's really all types. Some people fold their jerseys and keep them in, yeah, some sort of, a box that really protects them. Some people keep them on hangers, and some people keep them in displays in various different types of displays. So
Sure.
I think it's really kind of an even spread of all those things.
I have seen how the Baseball Hall of Fame does it, and I like their system. It's
Yeah,
pretty cool. And have you been
yeah,
down there to
yeah.
the
I have.
3D room they call it? Yeah.
I actually was lucky enough when I was a kid. Actually, I had a unique series of circumstances where I was able to get the behind the scenes tour
Wow.
at the Hall of Fame. And so yeah, like you say, you get to see how they keep them in storage.
Hmm.
They have the whole white glove
Yeah.
uh, protection. You can't touch anything without the white gloves. And but they keep them in boxes in storage. They have them set up
Yeah.
that way for the most part. But
I think from what I remember when I was down there, walking all the way to the left was just a straight wall of archival boxes of jerseys.
yep.
To the right was shelving that had the big wheels on it that you could move. And then in the back, they had more shelving that was permanent, and that's where they have and not a lot of people get to see this or even know. They probably think I'm crazy, but it's called the wall of balls. And you open up the cabinet and it's all archival boxes filled going back to 1954 of signed baseballs from Hall of Famers. So they started a little late, but in 54 they started saying, well, somebody said we should get signed baseballs of these guys when they come back or they're inducted. And it evolved to the point where they would do a dozen or 2 dozen of every guy once they were inducted. But that took a while. And back in the 50s, believe it or not, I mean, the baseballs were harder to get. So they didn't have like, Jimmy Fox would be there and they might have six Jimmy Foxes, but they had a dozen. I think my hands were shaking. They had a dozen Mel Balls, single signed that.
Yeah.
And I was like, boy, man, these are just donated. This is like they did it for the Hall of Fame. If you guys they and the hall at the time, and I don't know how it's changed back in 2010 or so when I had that visit, um, they were constantly needing money for exhibits to raise money, and they're looking for donations all the time. And I'm like, well, why don't you just auction off a set of baseballs from all these guys? I mean, they had everybody you could think of. I mean, they didn't have Ruth because Ruth was gone by the time they started. But if you think of any Hall of Famer that was alive in 54 or inducted at 54 or after, they have it. And
Yeah.
it's crazy. I said, the money you have sitting here is crazy. And then the Ruth bats too. I think there was 16 game used Ruth bats, something like that's in the cabinet across from that. And that was pretty cool. They open that up and there's all these Ruth bats. It was like,
Yeah. Oh,
pick
it's
out any one you
insane.
want. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, the storage, the stuff they have in archives at the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, it's insane. And you have more and more that they're getting. I don't get, you know, how they even have all the storage for all these pieces. One recently I think it was just a year or two ago, is right when Ichiro, Seattle guy, of course, was inducted. And it was a little unfortunate actually for us at Resolution. We had been working with one of his agents directly. He was actually having us photo match a few of his pieces. So we photo matched a few of Ichiro's pieces, and then we were hoping to get some more, really work through a lot more of his collection. And he decided he was just going to donate everything he had to the Hall of Fame. And that's what he did. And of course, the Hall of Fame, they don't really get any outside authentication. But yeah, so now they have probably hundreds of Ichiro pieces just sitting in storage. And I'm like, man, I get donate anything the Hall of Fame wants, but all that other stuff that's just gonna sit in storage, let other people display it. But yeah,
I had a chance to see a lot of his stuff up there in Seattle because he worked pretty closely with Mill Creek Sports, and
right.
I've seen
Yeah,
his MVP awards and stuff like that. It's really cool to see that stuff. And
yeah,
I don't think he really. I mean, I think he respects the game obviously tremendously, and he respects the players that came before him. He's big into that, but I'm not sure how much he likes the award part and the bats and trophies he got. I think those are have a great place in the Hall of Fame. If they could display them. I mean, they don't have
right.
the room
They
for
can't
it.
display everything, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's interesting. Well, I wanted to ask you too, uh, in terms of obviously all of the autographs you've seen over the years, do you have any, one, maybe the most unique, favorites, maybe the rarest, any direction you want to go there? Any tops on the
I did
list?
it. I did at one time. I mean, I had cool stuff. I've always had cool stuff. A lot of the Star Wars stuff that I started auctioning off about 2022. I had the 77, 1980, 1983 tops runs. That I sold through Golden, and I sold two posters, a Star Wars and an Empire poster, that were very unique, and both set world records for prices on posters for Star Wars posters, which still hold up till today. Yeah, I mean those type of things. I think in Star Wars land, I had he's. I don't know if anybody knows who Dengar is. He's a bounty hunter, but in Empire, he was also a boxer. And I had located one from years ago on a boxing photo or just a publicity photo. And that was a rare one. I end up with rare autographs from time to time. I have seen more than I have, unfortunately. I've got cool stuff signed by Harrison Ford, and I was like the early autographs, obviously, and George Lucas index card from 1974 before he ever did Star Wars, just stuff like that I think is cool that I have. I have a letter that's kind of weird. I showed Carlton Fisk, and he was like, "Where did you get that?" So it's a long story, but when he was 8 years old, he wrote a letter to like an outdoor company asking for a catalog. And this is a handwritten letter from Carlton Fisk when he was 8 years old, in the envelope still, postmarked. And Fisk is like, I don't remember writing that, but that's my address on the return. And that's weird. He's like, I don't know how you got that. I said, you know what? It was on eBay. And I
Oh,
guess the company probably went out of business and someone was going through their archives and said, hey, wait a minute. That's Carlton Fisk. We got to sell that. So they put it on eBay and sold it. I think I paid like $10 for it. You find
yeah,
really weird stuff
that's
out there.
crazy. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
really
obviously
weird
that
stuff.
one, it had to have been an archive because obviously at 8 years old, no one knew who Carlton Fisk was
No, they
until a
didn't.
number
But he
of
was
years
very
later.
popular in that area growing up, but still, it's kind of crazy. So just
Yeah,
weird stuff like that, you know. And I have a Walter Payton autographed album page from Jackson State where he inscribed that. And I'd never see those. I mean, the early Payton autographs from college, almost non-existent. And I always loved early autographs. So, you know, Harrison Ford from, you know, the 1970s was a lot better than Harrison Ford from the 1990s. Just unique stuff like that. I think that stuff is cool. You know, I have Harrison Ford writing "Merry Christmas," you know, just weird stuff. But eventually it'll all go bye bye. You know, this isn't,
yeah,
but the
yeah,
rest of it will. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. How about like the signature itself? Any that you've just seen authenticated over the years that are just like the craziest looking signature you've ever seen, or any that really stand out in that way?
Um, Crazy signatures. Let's see. Not really that crazy. Maybe crazy inscriptions. I had all the crazy Mark Hamill inscriptions for years on cards that went in the card sets. I still have a few signed photos that he inscribed, kind of craziness. I'd say like crazy signatures. I don't know. You know what? A signature that I could that I that he's got. You just mentioned it was Ichiro, and if you go back and look at Ichiro, right when he came to the Mariners, his autograph was different, a lot different than what he evolved into now. Now he's just like a machine. And I had gone
Mhm.
to a signing probably now 10 years ago. Mill Creek did one, and I was up there working, and they're like, why don't you come to the signing with Ichiro? I went to it. And I just watched him sit there, and he was just like this machine, like,
Mhm.
and they put the ball there. It was the same thing every time. That one guy put it there, one guy grab it, and it was just he was a machine. And I always liked that and looking at that, I'm like, that's pretty cool to see a guy. There's
Yeah.
nothing evolving there. But I went to a signing in 2018 with Ben Affleck, and Ben Affleck was using, I think, 15 different signatures during the signing. So thank
Hmm.
God the client had it witnessed because people were like, well, that's really Ben Affleck's signature. I'm like, yeah, he signed it right in front of my face. But he kept varying it through the whole time.
Was
And
that
people do
one
that.
where was he just kind of getting lazy, getting sloppy a little bit, or
No,
why do you
he
think it
enjoyed all
was?
of it. The guy was working hard. He had
Yeah.
sweat running down his face. You know, someone was basically pouring Starbucks in him. He was working hard, but he was just all over the board. At first, he comes in
Hmm.
and goes, "Well, I'm going to give you a nice autograph. I'm not going to give you my street autograph." He said that. But, you know, as the day evolved, he kept changing that too. Because I don't think got a grasp on it yet because he hadn't done a signing. It was first signing ever. So he just was all over the place. And then when I go back and look at, you know, like Kobe Bryant too, and watch his evolution from high school, you know, through the end of his life, it's pretty interesting. And then I had a chance to sit with him in 2008. I was in Chicago working. I was at O'Hare Airport. Well, comes walking through is Kobe Bryant security. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Said hi to him, got a picture with him, went on my way, went and got on the flight. I get on the flight and he's sitting right behind me in first class.
Hmm.
And I waited till his rep was with him, went up to go to the bathroom. And I said, hey, I want to introduce myself. I'm an autograph authenticator. He's like, really? Tell me about this. And I said, well, I pulled up your archive I've got. And I pulled up the archive of Kobe Bryant's I had. And he's like, I remember that. I remember that one. He's like, I signed that when I was in high school, and I remember that girl I signed it to. Like he had a recall on him. At the end of the
Hmm.
flight, he goes, "Here, let me give you my phone number." He gives me his phone number. He goes, "If there's anything you got questions about or want to show me stuff, call me. You could send me anything you want to look at." Couldn't have been nicer. And that was just kind of a cool experience because I've watched that evolution of his signature through the years from high school through NBA draft camp to his first year in the NBA to actually even before that he did the signings for scoreboard and you know Kobe Bryant 8 you know and everything he had to sign. So it's kind of cool to see how he's changed and then you know he did the stuff with Panini and all that stuff. I mean it's really neat to watch that evolution. I'd say evolution is a better word for it. Just watching guys change and how they change their style and what circumstance it is. You're going to get a different autograph from Robert De Niro in person than you would get at a signing. And a lot of celebrities I could say that for. Al Pacino was notorious for just signing a circle or a dot. I mean, that's just how he was. But at the signings, which I've been to 5 or 6 of them, watching him sit there and sign, he'd pump out these beautiful Al Pacino autographs. So it was really cool.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that story about Kobe,
yeah,
meeting him and him recognizing all those different signatures. That's really cool. But,
yeah, it's cool.
well, I want to take a second. Tell us a little bit more about the Grad collection. What it's all about. What's some of the stuff you have that's a part of the Grad collection? Tell us more there.
We're heavy centric in a lot of Star Wars stuff. So there's going to be a lot of Star Wars, but it's everything I collected, and it's a lot of in-person stuff, and it's a lot of stuff I've purchased through the years. And I would say 90% is certified by Beckett. I've had a bunch of stuff done by PSA from years ago, and newer stuff. I'll get some stuff tickets done or Type 1 photos. It's just more of just the collection, and I think my wife and I were thinking years ago, like, what is a good name for this that we could do? And I said, well, how about Grad Collection? So we came up with that name, and currently have about 5,600 pieces up there right now. It's,
Wow.
as everyone tells you, and it's hard to get stuff pumped out to eBay. We did something though, which I think is more revolutionary than a lot of people are doing, is that we worked with a company in Phoenix that was able to take our entire inventory, transform it into write-ups using AI. And I think about 13 or 14,000 pieces we still have. So we have a program to go to, and we could get the listings up a lot quicker now. My wife could do 30 or 40 of them in an hour instead of 30 or 40 of them in 2 weeks. So eBay's a challenge getting the product up there, and we want people to see it. Through our website, Grad Collection, we're going to be offering a bunch of stuff coming up in the future. But one of them will have a Shopify on there. People could go there, and it'll feed off of our eBay. And then we're going to open the door to more consulting services and stuff. We're still kind of rolling out those programs and kind of thinking of ideas and kind of what we want to do over the next 10, 12 years. And I want to stay active in the hobby. I don't want to fade away. And I think it's important that I keep the name out there. I've built on this for years, and I want to make sure it stays out there. And collectors, I want to be a source to collectors still, like I always have been. But it's just been through companies. Now it's just me and my company. So, my wife and I run this. We do everything ourselves. We have a nephew that comes and helps us once in a while, but we built it up from nothing, and we're going to keep building on it. I've been in the business forever. I'm not going anywhere. And Grad Collection will kind of carry that on. So.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Can yeah, definitely check that out then for the listeners, the Grad collection. Well, Steve, thank you very much for being on the show today. This has been a lot of fun learning more about everything from you in the autograph world.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and I appreciate the opportunity. I really am going to get more content out there. So people who ask me every day. I'm definitely going to be doing much more content, and I finally feel I'm at the point where I can do that too. Because if you work in the industry nonstop, it's hard to constantly
Yeah,
put content. I don't know how Jeff Wilson does it, but I'm in it every day, and I have been for 24 straight years with either PSA or Beckett, and it takes a lot of your time. So now I have a little more time, and I'm still really busy, but I'm going to have more time to get that content out there. And I think that's really important. And let's educate collectors, please.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Steve. Thank you. Yeah, thank you to all the listeners of today's episode of the Game Used Podcast. And take a look for us on Thursdays coming up. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Bye-bye.